Well, hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Purposeful Marketing Podcast. Aren, Mary James here, and we also have a special guest, another Aren. As I always say, two Arens make a right. And I'm so happy she's here because she brought such a great topic that is definitely the essence of this podcast and why I wanted to start it, which is really talking about your marketing career and what got you here and how you think about it, how you act on it, how you react to it. And that's kind of what this conversation is going to be today. So we invited Aren here, and again, she's a strategist at Gorilla 76, and also a friend of the program. And we're going to kind of call this episode the why not approach. So before I kick it over to you, Aren, I'm just going to kind of frame it when you brought this topic, what I thought about, because it's awesome, is generally we always say ask the why on this show because we want us to think more critically about what we're doing. But with what you're saying is you can do that with your whole career. You know, you should ask these questions and then figure out how you're going to respond to them. That's kind of how I took it to heart. Again, that's my opinion and that's my thought. But I want to kick it over to you, Aren, just so you can kind of lay the land and say, you know, this is what you were thinking when you brought this topic to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Mary had kind of suggested something about, talking about asking why throughout your career. I started out in marketing. I'd say my first marketing job was an intern at Gorilla. And then since then I've worked in-house as an industrial marketer and then back on the agency side. And I also had a small stint where I worked as like an admin at like a financial services company. So I've kind of been all over the place for somebody that's relatively like still very new in their career. And when I think about asking why, like how I've kind of navigated that, I also graduated in the midst of the pandemic. So just even more craziness. You do have to ask why not a lot. Like, well, why shouldn't I just try planning a trade show or try learning how to run a webinar? Like, that's how I really learned. And I'm still learning that every day. I'm not saying, I'm 3 years into my career and I know what's best for me, but that's how it started, like moving the needle towards what I actually want to do, which is more in digital demand gen.
Love that. I think, because I'm going to kick it over to Mary as the other strategist on the call here, is you can make a whole career out of asking why not, right? And I think in ways it does help the strategy. I know even through your own experience, which is very similar to Aren's in a way, if you want to talk about that. But again, just living this whole idea of why not can really like lead the strategy forward and lead your career forward. Do you want to talk about your own experience, Mary?
Yeah, I would say mine and Aren's experience is really similar. So I started out just kind of, doing admin work or like random jobs, landed an in-house technical writing job that turned into a marketing job that turned into going to the agency side with Gorilla 76. And I found the same thing as you're almost asked a lot of like general questions. And Aren, I really want you to hit on the post that you put on LinkedIn about saying yes to a lot of things too, because I think that was really killer. And I experienced the same thing, was just any request that came to me, I said yes, because it was a learning opportunity. So it was either a way to learn more about the business or the company I was at, or it was a way to learn more about a tactic in marketing, a tactic in sales, a tactic in just like business operations in general. And then same as you, Aren, I found out what I really liked to do, what I enjoyed doing the most, and where I felt that there was a gap in industrial companies specifically, which was digital marketing. So, but before we like expand too much, I do want to hear your take on like saying yes to a lot, especially when you were an intern at Gorilla.
Yeah, when I was an intern at Gorilla, I was hired into our strategy department, but I worked with like pretty much everyone else outside of like design and dev because I don't have those skills. But yeah, it was just kind of like I had all this capacity. I liked helping people out. I liked learning. And I got to do so much. Like I worked on this big like sales. It was a big prospecting effort with Joe, like face to face with the founder, just because I was like, yeah, I'll learn how to use Sales Navigator, and it helped me really hone my like audience building skills. But yeah, it was just kind of like everyone knew if they had extra work, like I could probably help out or pick it up. So I think it was worth it to say yes as an intern. I think the further you get into your career, you have to balance saying yes and learning with also like setting boundaries for yourself. So that's something I'm like navigating now. But I think like early on, it was like, yeah, of course I'll say yes. And I still say yes a lot now.
I have a question. Um, was there a moment of like why not, or saying yes to something that was like particularly impactful, either to like how you think about marketing or your career, like something that you did that you never expected you would be doing, or um, something you took on where you learned something that kind of changed the way you thought about either your job or how you were going to complete it or where you wanted your career to go or anything like that?
Yeah, I would say like saying yes to my first like in-house marketing job. There were some aspect, well, it was an in-house marketer at an industrial company. So I was doing a little bit of everything that was marketing. And the biggest thing I said yes to that was outside of my comfort zone was trade shows. So that's something that really stretched me. I'm like standing in this giant empty conference hall in Las Vegas and just like, how are we going to get 6 giant pieces of machinery and get this booth looking nice in like 5 days? Like, that just felt like an impossible task that I had said yes to. And even though I've decided like live events and trade shows aren't for me, really, I learned so much through that process about project management, about messaging, networking, live events that has definitely influenced the work I do now on the digital side.
That's a very good example, and something you said is just so important and significant to listeners is sometimes you have to do it to understand it's not for you. But through that whole journey is you learn so much more about your career, yourself, how to do things. And I think that's so powerful because as you know, Mary James and I, we get a little higher in our senior career is maybe we need to say yes to more things. You know, a lot of time I say no to things. I'm getting really good at that. But it reminds me of my career too, is just like saying yes and then trying it out and then figuring out where it goes. And I think that's like some of the best learning experiences. Mary James, you have any experiences like that you want to share?
Yeah, this podcast. I think it was Aaron messaged me. It was like, hey, do you want to start a podcast with me and James or just join the one we've already gotten started? And I said, heck yeah, let's try it and see where it goes. And I think it's really honed my quote unquote public speaking skills because I'm not like, person facing, but I think it's helped me in Industrial Marketing Live, which is an event that Gorilla 76 runs. It's helped me in the podcast that accompanies that. It's helped me in client meetings. I'm just more comfortable speaking out loud now. So that's a really good example of a recent yes I said to.
Yeah, it's hard for me to think of a particular example that's just like overwhelming. I've done a lot of different work in my 29 years of existence, and I think that maybe like something to push Aaron, since you said you're saying no a lot, is like I find myself saying no but a lot. Like not, I think that like that's the next, when I started feeling like I was saying no all the time and I started to check myself about how much I was like not putting myself into my work, it became like you got to start like offering alternatives. If you say no to stuff, like you need to have something, like not an excuse, but like an actual other option. And what ends up happening is it's like, I think when as your career grows, you start to be someone who gets other people to say yes to things. I'm kind of curious, Aaron, if there was any time either like in-house or like coming back to Gorilla where you feel like you kind of influenced other people to start saying yes to a certain, project, or maybe something that you wish more people were saying yes to kind of in this space.
I think like I've never had direct reports or any like formal leadership in my career yet. So I can't think of a time I've influenced someone else, but I feel like something I've experienced since coming back to Gorilla that I wish more marketers would say yes to is like learning from each other, like casual moments. There's so many times where, like, Mary, for example, will throw out, hey, I'm doing XYZ for a client. If anybody else is like interested in seeing how I do it, you can like hop on this Zoom with me. And that's something I've said yes to a lot. I've like shadowed Mary and Brendan and other strategists at Gorilla a lot. And I think like the more senior you get in your career, it's like feels weird to shadow or like put out that opportunity to just like bounce things off of people. And I wish more people would say yes to that because that's been a great experience.
I think with saying yes, you to James' point, it's like you should keep doing it. Like you should absolutely keep doing it. I think what you learn to do is exactly as James put it, is like almost like improv, like yes and, but you're saying no and. Because I think with anything you try to do, you don't want to close doors for yourself or anyone else. And I think there are plenty of scenarios I've thought about where I'm like, I just can't do that. But I had to say yes a bunch of times until I could even get to that point. So again, just this why not approach is like so important. I want to get that across. I think another idea with the why not, which we haven't spoken about yet, is conversation we've had several times. Other marketers talk about it too, is should you be a generalist or a specialist? Well, if you say why not, maybe you can be both. I don't know. Aren, what is your kind of experience with starting your career right now? Like, how are you thinking about that conversation about being a generalist versus a specialist?
Yeah, if I had a college grad asking me, like, this is my first job in marketing, what should I try to do? I think I would not shy away from a more generalist marketing coordinator position. I think that serves you well when you're trying to figure out what the heck you even want to do with marketing. The conversation about specialization, I think there's a few things that go into it, like what type of industry do you want to work in? So for example, like some of us work in industrial marketing where there's not always highly specialized positions, but we're like passionate about these industries we work with. But like if I was open to working in SaaS, I could get as specialized as I wanted to probably as a marketer. So that's one thing to think about. And also just, I don't know, it's what you like to do. I don't know if I know enough about that yet. I'd be interested, like Mary, James, Aren, like how you've kind of made that decision throughout your career. But those are two things that I think about.
I'm very glad that you answered in the way you did, because it sparks this other thought in me, that which is like generalization versus specialization. Usually people are talking about, well, gosh, like if you're just a marketing coordinator, you're doing trade shows, you're doing sales enablement, you're doing XYZ, you're performing all these different tasks. But the other way to think about it is like if you're in-house somewhere, you are seriously specialized into a customer base. You are really seriously niched down into a group of people. And like, I think that framing it that way speaks more to the way that I think about the only things that I like about marketing, which is like communicating as a human being to another human being. And I think that it serves people well to think about it that way. And that a marketer who is deeply connected to an audience is like a super dangerous asset. So I'm very glad that you answered the question in that way, because I think it's a mistake that people don't sometimes think about it that way, that people tend to always think about it in terms of what tasks are you completing, when I think it's a little bit more complicated.
Yeah, I like the way that you broke it down too, Aren. And what segment do you want to be in? Not just what do you like to do in marketing as a skill set. I think that there's also, like a freelance option. Freelancers are incredibly niche down in their skill set. You could have an SEO person, a person to run your paid Facebook, freelancers to run whatever you want, consultants to run the same type of deal. But I completely agree with you. Early in your career, take a general role, find out just what you like to do, and then specialize in it. So I know I want to stay in industrial. I love digital marketing for the same reasons James just articulated, which are I like seeing people communicate together. And, the part that James hates about it is the part I love, which is what moves people to action to purchase a product or service. And I think that's just really super interesting from a digital perspective. And I think, like I said before, that there's a gap in the industrial space where that is just not as respected as it should be.
Heck yeah. I think another idea with asking why not and saying yes is the reason why it doesn't happen. And I think that's the human element, which is failure or I'm afraid. And I think in my life, that's why I was trying to say yes, because I knew I was afraid. And I was like, if I didn't try this, I probably would never be good at it. Now, Aren, for yourself, is that something you consider? Is that something you thought about and maybe whatever point of view you took and you're like, I'm not afraid of anything. I'm going to say yes. I'm just going to let you have the floor.
Oh no, I definitely have experienced a lot of anxiety trying new things throughout my career, just throughout life in general. I think part of what's eased that is no matter where I've been, I've always been surrounded by really great people. Whether I was in-house or an agency, like there's great leadership. There were people that I knew weren't going to like ridicule me if I failed. They would take actions to help prevent me from failing. So it's not like I had a safety net I could be willy-nilly, but I felt supported. And I think that's really important to think about. Like if you want marketers that say yes and try new things and really push the boundaries of what you're doing as a company, you need to create an environment where they feel safe doing that.
Yeah, and I think Gorilla 76 has that. I think Proofpoint has that. It's just super duper important. James, it looks like you had a comment, so I'm going to give the floor to you.
Oh, I did not have a comment. I usually am moving around to touch my microphone and unmute it. You're absolutely correct, but that's not true. I can make a comment, and that's to
Why not?
reiterate, the back end of what Aren said. And it's like if you're working with other people, if people are saying no when you're like trying to collaborate with them on something, or you're trying to pull them into a project that you're doing, think about whether you're like presenting that in a way that alleviates their fear. Like, recognize that when you're asking someone to step out of their comfort zone, and think about what you can do to make that a more enjoyable experience. Because I think we'd all agree that doing something we've never done before can be really exciting. And being a part of someone else doing something they've never done before is really exciting. But to get those opportunities as like a collaborator or, a leader involves like doing the hard work of getting rid of some of that anxiety, of maybe even like collecting some of that anxiety so that the other person doesn't have to deal with that. And it also makes me think of, if you're setting people up to say, why not, in your organization, do people want to collaborate with you? Are you giving people enough opportunities to do that? Maybe if you're thinking about saying no to something, can you ask someone else? Is that something like, maybe as a marketing generalist, you're not going to delegate that, but maybe someone who might want to take that on. someone else in the organization who might want to take something on. So I think that's like another way to, you know, be like a really serious contributor without without only being able to do that by stretching yourself, is to think about like all the different ways that you can contribute towards an objective being reached. And it's not always doing the hard work. Sometimes it's like doing the soft work of collaborating and being kind and helping people.
Yeah. And okay. That great segue to the last question I want to ask Aren is like this idea of one, creating a space, an opportunity to really allow others to collaborate. I think I see that with what you're doing on LinkedIn and what you're posting about and how you're learning in public. And you're kind of saying, why not with what you're posting, right? Let me just kind of talk about what I'm learning. Do you kind of want to talk about your experience of like why you started on LinkedIn, like kind of what your thoughts are, and like, am I right there? Like you just want to kind of learn in public and do this kind of why not approach to your life?
Yeah, honestly, it was a bit of a bandwagon when I started at Gorilla. Like everyone had such great content. I mean, like Mary's literally the queen of LinkedIn. And so I was like, oh, if I could be a little bit more like Mary, I'm gonna try. So that's what got me into it. But yeah, I guess it has been a little bit of wanting to learn in public. It's also cool to just see what resonates with other marketers and other people in industrial marketing. It kind of informs what we do, like for our marketing at Gorilla, but it also just helps me feel more connected to my peers in this space. And like every time I get a message that's like, oh, I feel so seen by this post, I feel like that's why I want to be on LinkedIn. And that's why I love, I don't know, connecting with people there.
Definitely. How about you, Mary? Because it's kind of the same question to you, really.
Yeah, that's exactly why I started posting too. I wanted to post for people like me who found themselves in a marketing position and had no idea what they were doing. And I learned marketing through so many great people and found them through LinkedIn. So I just wanted to be that resource for other people.
Yeah, and that's what this podcast is a resource for our fellow marketers. Because again, when we started, I certainly want to talk about philosophy and ask these big questions, but I just want to bring in other practitioners to talk about their journey, their life, what they're experiencing, because I think it brings us together, but it also makes all of us better marketers. And I appreciate you coming on, Aren, and kind of sharing that and getting personal with us. Love that. I'll do kind of our wrap up call.
Oh, wait,
here.
hold on. I have one more
Go
question.
ahead.
I have one more question for Aren. What are you saying why not to this year?
Ooh, I think the relationship between sales and marketing is really interesting. And so I work with our founder, Joe, at Gorilla on like our internal marketing for Gorilla, which is inherently linked with like our sales process. So I guess I'm kind of saying why not to sales this year and like learning more about that and how it relates to the work I do as a marketer.
That's awesome. Love that.
Well, yeah, in about 3-6 months, let's invite you back on, Aren. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about what you learned. That's what this is for. Okay, so appreciate everyone for listening. This is on all the podcast channels, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever Google's called. I'm keep throwing episodes up on YouTube. We are taking guests this year in 2023, even though my calendar says 2022. I'll fix that next time. If you do want to DM me, that's how I've been getting in contact with people. And we've just been setting up calls and having good conversations like we had today with Aren. So thank you, listeners. Have a good one. And we'll talk next time.